Martis.
Here.
McKinney.
Here.
Morgan.
Here.
Price. Here. Snyder.
Here.
Long John.
Here.
Madam Chair, you do have a quorum.
Thank you. Rep. Mueller makes a motion to excuse absent members. With that, absent members are excused. And Chair Anthony.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. We'd like to call the Senate Committee on Appropriations to order. Mr. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Chair Anthony.
Here.
Senator McCann. Senator Cherry.
Here.
Senator Bear.
Here.
Senator Santana.
Present.
Senator Schenk.
Here.
Senator Irwin.
Here.
Senator Hertel.
Here.
Senator Kavanaugh.
Present.
Senator Kleinfeld.
Here.
Senator McMorrow. Senator Camilleri.
Here.
Senator Bumstead.
Here.
Senator Albert.
Here.
Senator DeMoose.
Here.
Senator Heisinger.
Here.
Senator Altman. And Senator Tice.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have 16 members present. You have a quorum.
Thank you. I move to excuse absent members from today's meeting. I believe that's supported by Senator McCann. Without objection, absent members will be excused from today's meeting. We'd like to thank Chair Boland for hosting us today in the House Appropriations Committee room. I'm no stranger to this room, having served on the House Appropriations Committee. So it's an honor to be here, and I look forward to the presentation. Without further ado, we'd like to turn it back over to Chair Boland.
Thank you, Chair Anthony, and welcome everybody. We are here today. Some of our members I know are traveling, so some may be by Zoom, so we will allow for questions from them. And with that, Director Flood will invite you up to open up with your presentation. We look forward to hearing the exec recommendation.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Chair Boland, Chair Anthony, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present Governor Whitmer's Fiscal Year 27 Executive Budget Recommendation. This is a budget that helps Michiganders save money, improves student literacy, protects access to healthcare, and sets Michigan up for long-term success. First, I want to take a moment to reflect on how far we've come. Thanks to the governor's leadership and the work of so many people in this room, Michigan is stronger today than it was 8 years ago, fiscally, economically, and competitively. That progress did not happen by accident. It came from steady leadership and bipartisan work that's focused on long-term sustainability. Education. The commitment to Michigan's kids has been just as deliberate. Free pre-K for every 4-year-old is now a reality with record enrollment. More than 51,000 children are currently enrolled in the Great Start Readiness Program, and more than 121,000 kids have accessed free pre-K in total. Per pupil funding has increased from $7,800 to more than $10,000 per pupil, a more than 30% increase, strengthening classrooms and expanding student supports. Free breakfast and lunch are now offered for every public school student. And we all know that when students are fed, they're ready to learn. Michigan's economic strategy is focused on both entrepreneurship and good paying jobs, and that focus is paying off. In 2025, CNBC ranked Michigan as a top state for business, recognition that reflects improvements in our workforce infrastructure and overall competitiveness. Since 2021, state programs have supported more than 4,500 new small businesses, helping local entrepreneurs across our state turn ideas into reality. Investments in innovators and high growth sectors have helped spur $12.6 billion in new industry investment since 2019, advancing our leadership in advanced manufacturing, mobility, defense, and technology. This year also marks the first full year of long-term dedicated road funding, ensuring that every dollar paid at the pump goes directly to roads and bridges. Predictable funding means safer roads in every region of our state and more than 30,000 jobs supported every single year. We've taken concrete steps to ease financial pressure on households. The Working Families Tax Credit has quintupled, delivering one of the largest tax cuts for working families in state history. The combined federal and state relief averages $3,900 per family, and it helps more than 660,000 working households across our state. This is money that helps cover groceries, childcare, rent, and transportation. We cut taxes on tips and overtime so workers can keep more of their hard-earned dollars. And at the same time, we've expanded affordable housing. Since 2020, more than 80,000 affordable housing units have been built, supported by record investment in the Michigan Housing Community Development Fund. Housing stability is economic stability for families and for communities. Revenue sharing has increased by more than $300 million, a 31% increase since the governor took office. That funding helps communities support police and fire, maintain road and bridges, and provide essential services. Underlying all of this work is fiscal discipline. We've passed 7 bipartisan balanced budget, paid down $28 billion in debt by the time the governor leaves office, had our credit rating upgraded, and built up strong reserves. The progress we made gives us the footing to confront what's ahead, thoughtfully, strategically, and without losing sight of the people who depend on us to make thoughtful decisions. While we've made real progress across Michigan, this year we face a unique and challenging budget landscape. Rising costs, changes coming from Washington, D.C., and uncertainty are exerting pressure on resources and forcing difficult decisions. States across the nation are confronting similar pressures, and many are less prepared to respond effectively. Over the last year, we've seen sweeping changes out of Washington, D.C., pausing grants, enacting tariffs, shifting costs to states, targeting Medicaid, all of which create significant uncertainty for state budgets. Last July, Michigan faced a $1 billion cliff overnight caused by the passage of H.R. 1 and a looming road funding cliff. Early actions stabilized the budget last year, addressed immediate risks to Medicaid financing, and provided long-term funding for roads, but Michigan continues to face challenges that you'll see reflected in our budget today. Rising costs, Medicaid changes, and ongoing federal uncertainty continue to put pressure on the budget and strain our resources. Rising healthcare costs are something that everyone is feeling, families, small businesses, and it impacts the state budget as well. Congress allowed the Affordable Care Act subsidies to expire at the end of last year, increasing costs for many Americans. And as these subsidies go away, premiums rise, coverage becomes less affordable. But these changes don't just impact people who are shopping for healthcare coverage on the marketplace. When coverage becomes more expensive or people lose access to insurance, it impacts all of us, whether it's through higher premiums, increased out-of-pocket costs, employer expenses, uncompensated care, or state budget pressures. Medicaid is directly impacted by these rising costs as well. National Medicaid spending is projected to grow 8 to 9% annually despite declining enrollment. And in Michigan, enrollment is lower than during the pandemic, but our remaining population is older and sicker and more complex, requiring more intensive and expensive care. We cannot contain cost through efficiency alone. And later in our presentation, we'll discuss Michigan's proposals to address climbing costs in the budget for fiscal year 27. As healthcare costs are rising across the country, the federal government is passing the tab to states. Last summer, Congress passed H.R. 1, a sweeping bill that reshaped the federal-state partnership and created immediate and long-term challenges for states across the country. It includes broad changes to components of Medicaid and SNAP that have historically been federally funded and administered by the federal government. These changes pass the buck to states, and the average Michigander is paying the same amount in taxes that we send to Washington, D.C., and we're getting less back for it. When H.R. 1 first passed, we were projecting a $10 billion hit to the state budget by 2032. We all worked together last fall to take some major steps to mitigate the impacts. And based on the budget roads package that we passed last year, that $10 billion was shrunk down to $4 billion, which is a big step forward, but $4 billion is still significant for the state budget. We also invested early to drive down Michigan's SNAP error rate. As we're watching other states roll out their budgets across the state, right now executives are proposing dollars to drill down on this effort to drive down our error rate. And so we're many months ahead. Michigan's made great progress on this over the past few years, coming from a 13% error rate down to 9%. And with the resources from last year's budget, the department continues to focus on driving that down. Even with these steps, $4 billion in costs remain. DHHS is also estimating that 200,000 Michiganders could lose coverage. By failing to extend the marketplace subsidies, reducing enrollment, we're projecting about 6% reduction in coverage. Further, the Health and Hospital Association projects that H.R. 1 will cost hospitals an estimated $6.5 billion through fiscal year 32. Across the nation, states are facing slowing revenue growth, the expiration of temporary federal support, and rising costs in healthcare, corrections, and education. You can see here a sampling of what other states are proposing to address these challenges. Kentucky, Washington, and Alaska are proposing large rainy day fund withdrawals, more than $1 billion because of federal changes and other economic challenges. At the same time, Washington and Delaware are increasing business taxes, and Alaska is proposing a new 4% sales tax. South Dakota and Idaho are both proposing to keep funding for education flat with no increases for inflation. And lawmakers in Idaho are considering cuts to education funding. So you can see this is a wide array of states led by Democrats and Republicans, and these are national headwinds that we're all facing. So let's be clear about the challenge in front of us. Heading into fiscal year 27, we're managing a $1.8 billion gap. This is largely driven by declines in revenue, rising healthcare costs, the direct fiscal impacts of HR 1, persistent inflation across sectors, and this budget also includes a narrow set of must-do investments that will preserve access to healthcare, create jobs, and keep communities safe. Healthcare costs alone account for nearly $1 billion of the gap that we're talking about here. Federal changes are shifting additional costs to state, and inflation plays a role in the state budget as well. So we can't wish these pressures away. We have to solve them. And as families across Michigan are tightening their belts, the state is too. The budget recommendation we present today makes the most of every dollar we have. It does this through balance and discipline. As you can see here, we're proposing a responsible mix of new revenue, reductions in efficiencies, and drawing from reserves to deliver a budget for the next fiscal year that benefits all Michiganders. In short, we're confronting the numbers strategically and making deliberate choices to preserve what matters most. By focusing our resources thoughtfully, we can protect core services, strengthen infrastructure, and make targeted investments that help our communities thrive, even in the face of ongoing fiscal pressures. We've got to continue to deliver on what matters most to Michiganders, lowering costs and providing opportunities for savings, supporting education, protecting access to healthcare, and keeping communities safe. The budget must also double down on fiscal responsibility, maintaining the strategies that have put us in a strong position over the last 7 years. By focusing on these priorities, we can protect the essentials, create opportunity, and continue to deliver lasting results. And today, in his last official duty as Deputy Budget Director, it's fitting that Kyle's gonna help close out this portion of the presentation, and tomorrow he will fully be only the DTMB Director, but we're really lucky to have him here and for his service in the Budget Office over the last 3 years. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Director Flood, chairs, and committee members. I know you guys see in the PowerPoint what slide we're on and how many we have to go through, so I will try and be as expedient as possible so we can have time for questions. This recommendation we're presenting today totals $88.1 billion. Of that total, only 16% comes from the general fund, meaning a vast majority of the state's budget comes from resources dedicated for specific purposes. 41% of our state budget comes from federal funds, and 25% makes up the school aid fund, and the remainder is restricted or private funds. As you look at the breakdown of the general fund, it's important to understand what this pie chart represents. In most years, the general fund is where flexibility exists. It's where new initiatives, strategic investments, or emerging needs are typically addressed. But today, more than 80% of the general fund dollars are already committed to core services that Michiganders rely on every day, including healthcare, services to protect vulnerable children and adults, education, and public safety. That means the portion of the budget that is truly discretionary is small. And when costs rise, particularly in Medicaid and human services, it puts immediate pressure on the same limited pool of general fund resources to support our broader priorities. This is why federal cost shifts and rising healthcare expenses have such a direct impact on the state budget. This next chart shows general fund spending over time. This year, the general fund is almost $500 million smaller than last year's enacted budget. And when adjusted for inflation, you can see that general fund spending has remained relatively flat, even as we've made significant investments in our priorities and managed major federal disruptions. This also reflects some of the structural adjustments we made last year in response to the federal changes and rising costs. This recommendation builds on 7 consecutive balanced bipartisan budgets. Our past financial discipline positions Michigan to weather current uncertainties while protecting key priorities. CREC recommended a withdrawal from the Budget Stabilization Fund to address temporary pressures. And this recommendation includes a $400 million withdrawal in fiscal year 27, which is less than the CREC calculated. Even with this withdrawal, sound fiscal management throughout the governor's term means our reserve balances have more than doubled. Strategic use of reserves allows the state to maintain critical services and investments, even without compromising, even in a challenging budget environment. This approach ensures we can stay focused on the priorities that matter most to Michiganders without compromising long-term fiscal stability. This budget stays focused on providing savings and lowering costs where families and small businesses feel them most. While we manage the state's balance sheet, Michigan families are managing their own finances. And they're still dealing with higher costs for housing, childcare, healthcare, and everyday essentials. The governor's recommendation is about using the tools we have to ease that pressure, put money back in people's pockets, and make sure Michigan remains affordable and competitive. This budget continues to lower the cost of education for Michigan families, from the first day of preschool through post-secondary education. Taken together, Michigan's education investments can save families more than $50,000 per child over the course of their education. Free, high-quality preschool for every 4-year-old represents up to $14,000 in savings before a child even enters kindergarten, while also ensuring they start school ready to learn. Free breakfast and lunch have lowered grocery bills by roughly $1,000 per child each year, while removing hunger as a barrier to learning. This budget codifies free school meals statewide, cementing them as a permanent part of Michigan's education foundation and providing families with certainty for years to come. And through tuition-free community college and expanded scholarship opportunities, students can receive up to $27,000 toward a certificate, associate's degree, or bachelor's degree. The budget also includes a new sales tax holiday to help families save on back-to-school essentials. Household budgets are stretched, and this provides direct, tangible relief when families need it most. This budget continues to lower costs and put money back in people's pockets of working families and seniors. The working family tax credit has quintupled, delivering one of the largest tax cuts for roughly excuse me. I hit the wrong button by accident, sorry. Cuts for roughly 665,000 households. On average, families are receiving $3,900 in combined state and federal support for childcare, groceries, transportation, and other essentials, helping strengthen financial stability in every county. Deductions on overtime and tips continue, helping nearly 500,000 Michiganders save on average of $500 a year on overtime, and about 300,000 workers save roughly $400 a year on tips. Expanded retirement tax credits remain in place, putting about $1,000 back in the pockets of nearly 500,000 seniors to help with housing, medication, and daily expenses. Deductions on Social Security benefits also continue, saving up to 40,000 Michiganders roughly $500 a year. Together, these measures make everyday expenses more manageable and give families more breathing room. Housing costs continue to rise, and inflation has placed real strain on household budgets, especially for seniors living on fixed incomes. Property taxes represent one of the largest and most predictable ongoing expenses for seniors. When those costs increase, it can put long-term housing stability at risk. The fiscal year 27 budget proposal provides targeted property tax relief to more than 335,000 seniors, helping offset recent cost increases and easing that pressure. On average, eligible households would see about $345,000 per year in savings, meaningful support that helps cover essentials like utilities, groceries, and medication. At its core, this proposal is about helping seniors remain in their homes, maintain independence, manage rising costs with greater certainty. This budget focuses on giving every child the opportunity to succeed from early childhood through their degree and prepared for a well-paying career. Strong literacy skills are one of the clearest predictors of long-term success in school in the workforce and in life. That's why this budget keeps a clear focus on helping students read proficiently by the end of third grade and stay on track from there. Per pupil funding increases by 2.5%, bringing the foundation allowance to $10,300 in fiscal year 27, which represents a 31% increase since 2019. The proposal continues expanding Michigan's literacy coaching network, now supporting 420 coaches statewide, which is 327 more than when the governor took office. These coaches work directly with educators, strengthening classroom instruction and helping identify and address learning gaps early. Districts are also supported and adopted high-quality, research-based literacy curriculum aligned with the science of reading, so classroom materials reflect proven strategies. And educators continue to receive advanced training in the science of reading through letters, deepening and improving consistency in how reading is taught across the state. The foundation for long-term success begins before kindergarten. That's why early childhood education remains foundational in this budget. The proposal includes $176 million in total support for early childhood programs, including pre-K for all, increasing the per-child allocation and expanding available slots so more families can access high-quality early learning close to home. It also includes startup grants to open 1,000 additional classrooms, building out the infrastructure needed to reach universal access. Transportation funding helps ensure that geography is not a barrier to participation. Beyond the classroom, the budget recognizes that supporting young children means supporting their families. Regional family support investments connect parents to resources, guidance, and early intervention services during critical developmental years. Over the past several years, Michigan has made significant progress in increasing resources for academically at-risk students. This budget builds on that momentum, further strengthening support for students facing economic disadvantage and other barriers to achievement. Since 2019, funding for at-risk students has grown substantially by around 65%, reflecting a sustained commitment. This budget recommendation continues the transition toward a more transparent, student-centered funding model. Moving to a weighted per pupil approach allows funding to better follow student need while simplifying the system by incorporating key categoricals into the foundation allowance. We are also expanding support for students with disabilities to ensure districts have the resources necessary to provide individualized services. These investments recognize both the rising costs schools face and the importance of delivering high-quality instruction and support. As you know, learning doesn't stop when the school day ends, and the state has seen more requests than ever for support for before and after school programs. This budget expands access to even more students so that even more students can participate, giving them safe, structured opportunities to explore interests, get extra academic help, and stay connected to positive adult mentors. For many families, these programs are both enrichment and essential support. At the same time, student well-being remains a top priority. Schools are responding to increasingly complex behavioral health needs, and this proposal ensures districts have the resources to meet them. In fiscal year 19, statewide mental health funding in the school aid budget was just over $35 million. Under this proposal, total funding would reach roughly $440 million in fiscal year 27, a more than 12-fold increase. This budget builds on that progress, ensuring districts can continue providing the services that help students feel safe, supported, and ready to succeed. Post-secondary education is a pathway to opportunity, and this budget keeps Michigan's universities and community colleges equipped to deliver high-quality programs to students across the state. Scholarships and financial aid continue to make higher education more affordable. More than 106,300 students have been awarded the Michigan Achievement Scholarship since its inception in 2024, and 128,000 students are expected to benefit each year once the program is fully implemented. More than 66,500 students have enrolled in community college with Michigan Reconnect since it was created in 2021. And this year, we're proud to expand its reach by lowering the age threshold from 25 to 21, opening doors for more Michiganders to complete their credentials or degrees and advance in the workforce. At the same time, strategic investments in campus infrastructure, technology, and safety create stronger learning environments. We've already discussed some of the federal pressures on the budget, and in fiscal year 27, we make investments that support Medicaid and access to health care across the state. Medicaid provides healthcare coverage to 2.5 million Michiganders, including more than 1 million children, hundreds of thousands of people with disabilities, seniors, and low-income Michiganders. Medicaid funding flows directly into our communities. It supports hospitals, physician practices, behavioral health providers, pharmacies, nursing homes, and home and community-based services in every region of our state. If we fail to fully fund Medicaid in fiscal year 27, the consequences would be real. Providers would face deeper financial strain, access to care could narrow, wait times could increase, and rural hospitals and long-term care facilities who are already operating on thin margins would be at greater risk of closing. When coverage erodes or reimbursement falls short, healthcare costs shift elsewhere, to higher premiums for small businesses and families, to local providers absorbing uncompensated care, and ultimately to taxpayers. People still need care. If they lose preventative or routine coverage, they often delay treatment and end up in the emergency rooms, where care is more expensive and less efficient. The FY27 budget recommendation makes responsible investments in Medicaid to provide stability for Michigan's healthcare system and protect Michigan families, small businesses, and communities from higher downstream costs. The strategic approach to sustaining healthcare combines new, dedicated revenue streams with targeted efficiency measures, ensuring we can manage costs and maintain coverage whenever we can. The budget updates tobacco and nicotine taxes to apply to vapes and electronic cigarettes, aligns online gaming and revenue with other states, and introduces a tax on digital advertising. New revenue will be dedicated to the Medicaid Benefits Trust Fund to preserve benefits and maintain coverage for eligible residents. Paired with efficiency measures, this approach allows Michigan to maintain reliable coverage, manage rising healthcare costs, and strengthen programs that improve healthcare outcomes for all residents, not just those on Medicaid. We're expanding access to coordinated, culturally responsive care through community health workers, helping residents to get the support they need close to home. Investments in public health also target programs funded by the new tax on vaping and non-tobacco nicotine products. These dollars also support smoking and cancer prevention, youth mental and physical health, and improve access to care. Finally, we're strengthening behavioral health capacity, including funding for the new state psychiatric hospital, ensuring more Michiganders have timely access to the care they need. Direct care work is some of the most physically demanding, emotionally intensive work in healthcare. This budget ensures that direct care work remains competitive and workers receive increased wages that keep pace with the state's minimum wage. By sustaining this enhancement and supporting paid sick leave, we are helping stabilize a workforce of more than 160,000 Michiganders. That stability matters because when staffing is short, quality of care suffers. Families feel it and providers face mounting pressure. At the same time, we are deploying funds to strengthen nursing home staffing, training, and quality improvement efforts. These one-time dollars allow us to target support where it's needed most and reinforce standards of care without placing additional strain on the general fund. Together, these investments recognize that quality long-term care depends on the people providing it. If we want safer facilities, better outcomes, and dignity for our fellow residents, we must ensure the workforce is strong, supported, and fairly compensated. As Director Flood shared earlier, HR 1 will have a significant general fund costs for the state of Michigan in fiscal year 27. A major driver of that is SNAP administration, where the state cost share rises from 50% to 75% starting October 1. The budget reflects a coordinated cross-department effort to implement new Medicaid and SNAP requirements, including work requirements and more frequent eligibility redeterminations. These investments support DHHS staffing and administrative capacity, help drive down Michigan's SNAP error rate, providing workforce training and registered apprenticeship programs in LEO, and enhanced data sharing systems in DTMB. Ensuring accurate eligibility reviews and building sufficient program capacity is critical to minimizing coverage losses and protecting access to care for Michigan families, seniors, and vulnerable populations. From high-tech innovation to small businesses across every community, Michigan is dedicated to helping businesses grow, connecting workers with the skills they need, and supporting industries that will drive the state's long-term prosperity. Fiscal year 27 marks the first full year of our long-term sustainable road funding plan, fulfilling the state's commitment to improving transportation for all Michiganders. $2 billion in ongoing funding will support better roads across the state once the plan is fully phased in, with a focus on local streets that people rely on every day. The plan also strengthens bridges, reduces congestion at rail crossings, and supports public transit infrastructure and operations. Beyond improving travel, these investments support roughly 30,000 jobs annually, helping communities grow and thrive while keeping people moving safely. When new resources from the roads package are combined with existing support, over $5.8 billion of state funding for roads, bridges, and transit is recommended in the governor's fiscal year 27 budget. This budget strengthens Michigan's economy and creates opportunities for families, businesses, and communities to thrive. It supports tourism and small businesses by attracting major events and conventions and sustaining the Pure Michigan campaign to draw visitors from across the country. It also invests in key infrastructure, including ports, positioning the state to attract federal and private investment and supporting long-term economic growth. The budget continues to incentivize investment and job creation, revitalize blighted properties, and leverage private capital. Since 2019, these efforts have supported more than 22,000 projected jobs and nearly $10 billion in private investment across Michigan communities. In FY27, we continue to establish Michigan as a national leader in advanced air mobility, bringing innovation, manufacturing, and jobs to the state. The budget invests in aviation, innovation, and drone initiatives in the Office of Future Mobility and Defense and Aerospace Innovation, helping the state continue to cement its leadership in high-tech industries. Maritime manufacturing and defense industries continue to receive targeted support, strengthening jobs and economic opportunity. Michigan competes every day for major projects and job creation opportunities, and increasingly, companies are looking for sites that are ready to go. This investment into public infrastructure builds a statewide inventory of development-ready location and helps prepare sites for future development or redevelopment, strengthening Michigan's ability to attract investment, create jobs, and move quickly when opportunity arises. Michigan continues to invest in arts and culture, helping communities host exhibitions, performances, and creative programs that enrich neighborhoods and make them more vibrant. Since 2019, almost 1,600 organizations have benefited from these efforts. Housing costs continue to strain families and local economies across Michigan. This proposal sustains funding to expand housing opportunities and gives communities greater flexibility to meet their most urgent needs. Together, these investments help build places where families want to live, entrepreneurs want to invest, and residents can thrive, supporting both economic growth and quality of life across Michigan. Protecting Michigan communities remains a top priority, helping first responders, strengthening public safety, and ensuring our neighborhoods remain safe and resilient. This budget continues to provide the resources that local governments need to keep residents safe. Combined constitutional and statutory revenue sharing has increased more than $300 million, or 31% since 2019, ensuring communities have the support they need for first responders, public safety, and emergency response services. Public safety revenue sharing grants provide targeted funds to enhance policing, prevent violent crime, and improve safety in neighborhoods statewide. We are also investing in prevention and coordination, including $2.5 million to continue the work of the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force, focused on solutions to make communities safer. Strong, connected emergency response is critical to keeping communities safe, and we continue to support the systems and partners that make that possible. The statewide emergency communications system keeps more than 2,600 public safety agencies connected, ensuring that first responders can coordinate quickly when every second counts. Local infrastructure preparedness funding identifies vulnerable communities and helps reduce risks and costs, supporting proactive safety planning across the state. We're also maximizing additional federal resources by supporting local ambulance partner and firefighter training funds. Michigan's natural resources, our air, land, and water, are essential to safe and healthy communities. This budget continues to invest in protecting them. Since the governor took office, the budget has supported forest management programs, overseeing nearly 4 million acres of state forest lands, timber sales, and generating $26 billion in economic value for our state. Increased tipping fees will reduce the flow of out-of-state trash into Michigan, clean up contaminated sites, and support local waste management. Since 2019, $1.7 billion has helped replace over 170,000 lead service lines and upgrade local water systems, improving access to safe, clean water for 10.1 million Michiganders. And that work continues in FY27. This budget also ensures that constitutionally required share of fuel tax revenue supports boating infrastructure and off-road vehicle trail development and maintenance. Updating game fishing and boating fees ensures that state parks can be maintained and improved so more residents and visitors can enjoy Michigan's great outdoors. Since 2019, Michigan has funded initiatives that promote private forest stewardship, preserving over 448,000 acres and supporting long-term land productivity. And our investments in fiscal year 27 continue to invest in our qualified forest programs. This year, the budget preserves over 22,000 acres of forest land in the Keweenaw heartlands and takes steps to improve access to this public resource. Along the Detroit River, investments preserve and enhance public boating access, making this popular recreational area even more welcoming for communities and visitors alike. One of Michigan's long-term focuses have been making state government more efficient, effective, and responsive to its residents. Michigan has continued to make investments in cybersecurity, homeland security, and information technology that's strengthening the state's ability to protect critical systems and data while improving how residents access services and how state government operates day to day. This year's budget continues to invest stronger, more accountable state government. It continues the rollout of Michigan's statewide judicial case management system, which is modernizing how our courts operate. With 275 of 302 trial courts already using or transitioning to that system, we are close to a full statewide implementation. We're also creating an internal compliance and risk management team to improve oversight across all our programs, reduce audit risk, and strengthen service delivery. Fraud prevention remains a priority with resources dedicated to safeguarding payments and ensuring accuracy. And the budget supports the Election Equipment Reserve Fund, helping local election officials maintain equipment and prepare for safe, secure elections statewide. In closing, fiscal year 27's budget is about real people and real priorities, saving money for our families and seniors, investing in education and pre-K through career, protecting access to healthcare, strengthening our communities, improving roads, and building a strong, diverse economy. It's about keeping delivering for Michiganders, even when the federal government is walking away. This budget reflects careful planning, disciplined management, and a commitment to making the most of every dollar, even in a challenging fiscal environment. We look forward to continuing the work together over the next couple months and delivering a balanced, fiscally responsible budget to Michiganders on time. By staying focused and working together, we can deliver a budget that keeps our promises, protects services, and positions Michigan for a strong future. And with that, we will turn it back over to chairs and happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Director Flood, Deputy Director. Congratulations on your new position as well. We look forward to working with you in that new capacity. I'll start off with questions. Chair Anthony and I will kind of rotate between the Senate and the House, and we'll try to do the best to get through everybody's questions. But I am most interested in fully supportive of greater efficiencies and saving money. We know, yes, there are a lot of demands on the general fund budget, and there are a lot of demands on working families in their pocketbooks. So can you please summarize how we're getting to the efficiencies if they are being pulled from other appropriated line items, reserve funds, and or some of the new revenue increases?
Sure. when we talk about Medicaid, costs are increasing, like the private sector for the state budget as well. And so, like we talked about, we're presenting revenue to make sure that we can continue to provide healthcare to the 2.5 million Michiganders who rely on it. And at the same time, we have to take a look at efficiencies and see what we can do to bend the cost curve. Other states are cutting rates across the board. That's not what we're doing here, but we're saying, let's pull together stakeholders and come together to identify 150 million in efficiencies so that we have sustainable Medicaid funding going forward. In addition, there's some other efficiencies throughout the budget. A couple that I can mention, we're recommending consolidating a few of the state police forensic labs. No layoffs of any workers, but moving workers into newer facilities and savings there. We have efforts on rural development in 2 different departments, both MDARD and LEO. And so in this budget, we're consolidating the Rural Development Fund and Board, which has been at MDARD, over to LEO, and combining that with the Office of Rural Prosperity, which will also be common sense for the stakeholders who are focused on rural development to have a one-stop shop.
Thank you, Chair Anthony.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Admittedly, it was hard to even listen to the latter part of the presentation because I was so focused on the beginning, in which Director Flood, you talked about the impact that the Trump administration and Congress and their actions and how that has impacted our state's balance sheet. HR 1, the big beautiful bill as it's sometimes called, you focused on the fact that it has impacted Michiganders' health care, which I think is how we're trying to solve some of those pieces with the revenue and efficiencies. But I take a broader view of this. I think about the impacts of tariff policies and how that has impacted our auto industry as well as family farmers. I think about our manufacturing industry. I think about the job losses, the impact of the big 3. And even this week, the notion that we would not open the Gordie Howe Bridge and what that would mean for our state's economy. And, you know, we can talk about efficiencies. We can talk about tightening our belts and increasing revenue, but we also need to pause to think about the fact that there were decisions made at the federal level. And when I look at who is holding the bag, it is people, Michigan's families, and where my question is going to land is it's also impacting local governments. Now, I know in the presentation we talked about revenue sharing being flat, but can you talk about some of the other ways that will try to help local government survive this? Many of us came from local government, and we know that some of the essential services that Michigan's families rely on come from local government. And we have, you know, just disinvested year after year after year. And now we're seeing kind of the chickens coming home to roost. And so I think before we start talking about any investments anywhere, level setting the conversation around the fact, I think, Kyle, you mentioned that at the end, it was hard to hear, but I think you said the federal government has basically walked away from Michiganders. And I don't think that any conversations, any budget negotiations can begin until we have that recognition that this was by design, that states across the country are cutting billions and billions of dollars from essential services because of those decisions. So can you just talk a little bit about how you talked about how we're safeguarding some portion of the resources that Michigan families rely on, but just talk a little bit about local governments.
Sure. And we did focus a lot today, given that it's the state budget presentation, on impacts to state government. But as you mentioned, there are a lot of impacts beyond that. I saw a report from the Tax Foundation this week that tariffs are expected to hit the average American household at a $1,300 cost this year. So families are feeling these changes. Hospitals are anticipating $6.5 billion in impacts over the next few years. And hospitals in a lot of our communities are the #1 employer. And so when they suffer, we all suffer. So when we talk about these impacts, we're focused in the state budget. how can we lower costs? We can't control or fix a lot of this, but what are some targeted things we could do? In terms of revenue sharing, we're proud that the governor's first 7 budgets had included a 30% increase in revenue sharing. And we know that communities are struggling just like the rest of us. And that's why it was important as we looked at property tax relief, which I know is important to many people in this room. We looked to find a creative solution that the state was bringing to the table and didn't impact local government to rely on the property taxes, and are proud we were able to hold revenue sharing harmless in a moment when we're facing a $1.8 billion gap and had to make a lot of tough decisions.
Representative Green.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentations today. You sort of feel like Groundhog Day all over, right? This is, I think, my 8th budget presentation, and I remember 2020 going into 2021, and then last year as well, I asked quasi the same question. In 2020, 2021, we had a huge influx of dollars from the federal government. In fact, if I remember correctly, inside of that ARPA bill, there was a whole bunch of subsidies set up for Medicaid that were set to expire in 2025, and lo and behold, they expired. And so then from there, last year I asked the question, it seems like we are addicted to federal dollars and to the strings that come with federal dollars. And how are we planning moving forward to get off those federal dollars strings? And now we are, lo and behold, at that point. But along with that, I guess another secondary question is, how much faith and trust do you put into projections? Because I believe University of Michigan came out in regards to tariffs and said that Michigan was going to lose 20,000 auto worker jobs. And then they just changed that projection and said that we're actually going to gain like 1,500. I believe it's 1,500 jobs? 4,000, I'm sorry. So we like to talk, we like to throw out all this stuff, we like to throw politicians under the bus. But when we start looking at numbers and we start looking at long-term projections and then the policies we make, spending $9 billion, and now the chickens came home to roost. So can you talk with us about the projections and talk with us also about what we're planning to do to get off the federal government's, get off the federal government's dole and make it so that we are responsible for ourselves?
Sure. I'll start with the ARPA dollars. Michigan took a very strategic approach where we invested the ARPA dollars that we had discretion over in one-time spending only. We deployed the majority of those dollars during the governor's first term, which was an all-Republican led legislature, as you probably recall. And so we invested none of those dollars in anything related to Medicaid that would be unsustainable. Federal tax dollars are tax dollars that Michigan people and Michigan businesses write checks to and send to Washington, D.C. And so we are aggressively fighting every day to bring back as much home as we possibly can. You mentioned tariffs, economic uncertainty. It's been a roller coaster that we've been on. I'm thankful that we have the state's top economists and the University of Michigan come together twice per year to give us updated estimates and economic projections. And you're right, the message is mixed. We're still understanding what tariffs will mean. They're constantly changing. So at any given moment in time, there may be a different interpretation. I'm just referencing a report from the Tax Foundation, which I don't think many folks would describe as left-leaning, pointing out that tariffs last year cost the average household, real person, not our broader economy, $1,000 per household, and are projected to cost $1,300 this year.
I can also add too, calendar year 26 is when a lot of those ARPA dollars run out. The state has to have that spent. A lot of those dollars were flow-through dollars to entities like schools and local communities for infrastructure projects. So places are going to start feeling the effects of those dollars running out at the end of this year. Services in schools are going to cease. A lot of that was for staffing and stuff. A lot of it was pandemic response stuff that no longer may be needed. But there's a lot of infrastructure dollars that were going to schools for, or going to local communities for infrastructure projects that, because of supply chain things or other other barriers aren't getting done and won't get done, and that money's going to go back to DC, and we're not going to realize the benefits of those dollars are invested here in Michigan.
Rep. Green, did you have a follow-up?
I feel like we're boo-hoo-hooing when we knew this was coming. We're saying all this is going away, but we knew it when it was given to us. And I feel like we weren't prudent. And I've been here for 8 years, in this spot for 8 years. I feel like we weren't prudent. And now we're going, oh, crud. Now what are we going to do when we knew it was coming down the pike?
Senator McCann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think these maybe tie together, which is that, administrations, to the last question, administrations change and new policy comes from new administrations. In this case, the national situation where, it's quite wrong-headed to take healthcare away from people when, especially in Michigan, we've worked very hard to expand healthcare. We accepted the federal Medicaid expansion in 2013, but now we see with the HR 1, the reduction of Medicaid coverage across Michigan and the impacts and the costs that we're going to see from that. And we know that kicking people off of Medicaid is going to increase everyone's healthcare costs, whether they're served by Medicaid or not. So I just want to zero in on your slide on HR 1 implementation. Here's approximately $95 million that has to come now in the budget to basically address some of the costs that are lumped on from the pass down and the additional costs being put on us from this policy at the national level. As you point out, it's now administrative cost share going from 50 to 75%. That's essentially in some ways an unfunded mandate. It's a cost that wasn't expected and wasn't anticipated, but here we have to carry the load. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit more about what we're doing to deal with that, what some of these funds have to be spent on, and what kind of unexpected or unknowns are still out there. Like, for example, work requirements that come with this Medicaid reduction of coverage. How does your department or how does this budget deal with those kinds of additional unexpected situations?
Yeah, we are projecting 200,000 Michiganders could lose access to Medicaid due to the new federal requirements. And that's why we're dialed in and focused on doing what we can to make sure people maintain access to healthcare. We've got some work groups pulled together across state government, DHHS, the budget office, DTMB, looking at what technology exists to better share information between departments, as well as LEO and from a workforce development angle. So we're taking a comprehensive approach to make sure we do everything we can to support people and maintain access to healthcare coverage. We know that the 1 million children who are on Medicaid are not subject to work requirements. People with disabilities should be exempted, but these savings that the federal government points to come from people losing access to healthcare. And so we're making these investments to make sure that we can help people keep that coverage. The timing is difficult. We're here presenting the budget today based on statutory deadlines. We're not expecting to get federal guidance on work requirements until June 1st. And so states are sort of left hanging to try to figure it out and do the best they can and put the pieces together on a short timeline. But we'll remain nimble and in touch with Washington, D.C.
Thank you for that. Along those lines, Director Flood, you did take us back to the COVID budget years, and we worked together across the aisle, and I think we were very prudent in our decisions to make sure that we were using COVID money for one-time spending. That resulted in a $9 billion fund balance in the general fund, which we now no longer have in reserves, and it could have helped in times like this for our roads plan. But I think that while the cost of care is going up, we need to make sure that, yes, absolutely supporting the most vulnerable. I have some concerns about the advance tax credit having gone away, But you mentioned about efficiencies in the Medicaid program. So what are we going to do to make sure that, one, that we don't have people that are not eligible, so we don't set ourselves in a situation where we are actually being penalized and have to pay the federal government back? But also, hand in hand with that, what are we doing to create the efficiencies you mentioned?
Sure. On reserves, we were looking back at the budget stabilization fund balance, and in 2002, the balance was 2.2 million. Today, we've got 2.2 billion in the BSF. We've got a school rainy day fund of 500 million, and we have other reserves in the school aid fund of 832 million. So I'm proud that we've been preparing for challenging budget times and extreme pressures. This budget continues paying down debt ahead of schedule. When the governor leaves office, we'll have paid down $28 billion in debt. So I think we've been very fiscally responsible. This budget continues that. As it relates to Medicaid, states across the country are slashing rates for providers. That's not an approach that we're taking with this budget. We know that Michigan's Medicaid program is one of the most cost-effective and efficient in the country. And so we need to be really thoughtful about bringing stakeholders together to identify opportunities to bend the cost curve while we make sure people maintain access to care. And on compliance and eligibility, that's something that we do take and have taken very seriously. DHHS undertakes a lot of efforts, partners with the federal government to make sure that we're providing services only to those who are eligible.
Thank you. Along that lines, I'm just going to continue on that. I see there is an increase of approximately 1,000 employees. And we know that we looked at the current year budget and looking at that. And so what is the influx of those increased positions, purpose?
About 90% of those are in the Department of Health and Human Services, so split between two places. One, we're opening, speaking of American Rescue Plan dollars, we will be opening our brand new world-class state psychiatric hospital later this year. That requires resources and FTEs to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our residents. I know we hear almost every day about the need for more psychiatric beds, and that hospital is going to open this year. We're really proud of that work. Additionally, the FTEs are dedicated to implementing Medicaid work requirements. So workers on the front lines helping people with applications and ensuring accuracy in those applications, which also helps to address the SNAP error rate. And then we also have additional resources for the department on compliance as well.
Thank you. Director Flood, you may want to put together like a 1 or 2 pager to explain how we used one-time federal COVID dollars for one-time needs, just to reflect members, just to, level set the understanding for members on the Appropriations Committee, just so that we don't continue to uplift a talking point that we blew $9 billion on waste, or that these were misappropriated funds for ongoing needs. So if your office could maybe just work on something just to level set that understanding. Senator Kleinfeld.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I just want to set the record straight on something. Michigan's been a donor state. So my family's from Montana, and when I go out to visit, they laugh and they joke with me and they say, "Thank you, Michigan." Because they're not a donor state. They're receiving the funds that we send to the federal government. So I don't know about anybody else here, but to me, our job is to fight to get every single dime back from the federal government that they have taken from our residents. So I apologize, but I wanted to set the record straight on that. Also, the new revenue, every single one of those things listed, we tried at some point to attach during the road package discussion, and they went nowhere. So I don't have a lot of optimism on where they're going to go. So I am looking forward to your plan B on that $700+ million, because I don't know exactly how we're going to deal with that. But my question is with regard to the 10% tax cut on the properties for the seniors. 2 things. The first is seniors aren't downsizing because of the pop-up, which means families that are growing can't upsize because of the pop-up, and new folks can't get into starter homes because of the pop-up. And that seems to be the number one issue with regard to property taxes. And rather than tackling that, we're doing just the straight 10% for seniors, whether they're downsizing, upsizing, or staying where they are. But could you explain how you're making whole local units of government and the schools and the counties on that? Could you explain the mechanism for that? Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
On the revenue options, the ones that are presented today have direct connection to public health. And so we think that that makes sense when we're talking about sustainable funding for Medicaid. And as you mentioned, they were discussed during the road funding debate. So I think there's some bipartisan support for a lot of those options. And the good news is today is day one. Here's our proposal, and the legislature will have an opportunity to put forward your own plan. We look forward to working with you and seeing what that looks like. The property tax proposal that we included, I know rising property taxes are a concern for families across the state, especially young families. Addressing the cap when a property transfers hands impacts local governments and schools. In our budget, we wanted to ensure to hold locals harmless. And so what we proposed is an income tax deduction for seniors based on what they pay in property taxes.
Rep. DeSanna.
Thank you, Chair Bolin. Thank you, Director Flood, for coming today. I just had a question on the taxpayer-funded pre-K. Michigan has had birth rates right around 100,000 per year, and I see you referenced a 121,000, 122,000 roughly of 4-year-olds. Where does that number come from?
We have this year 51,000 students enrolled in the Great Start Readiness Program. This is our, we've been expanding eligibility over time. So the 121,000 students is cumulative since the governor took office.
Oh, the total. Okay, thank you.
Senator Irwin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. One of the challenges that our residents face here in the state of Michigan is how they can age in place. We know that there are a lot of people in our state who want to stay in their homes as they age. We know that they'll be happier. We know that they'll be healthier. And maybe here in the Appropriations Committee, it's important to mention that we also know that it will cost the state of Michigan less if they're allowed to age in place. But unfortunately, we've set up a system in our state such that the people who provide home-based care are provided such a pitifully low wage, such an embarrassingly low wage, that there are residents all over our state and every one of our districts who are eligible for home-based services, but who can't get access to those home-based services because there are just not simply people who are willing to do that difficult, intimate, emotional work for our seniors to keep them safe for a wage that is less than they can earn in any other entry-level job. So I see that within your recommendation here, there is some attention to that important need. And I want to invite you and ask you to talk a little bit about how this budget recommendation will attend to the people who depend on this service and the people who provide this critical service.
Thank you. Direct care workers have some of the hardest jobs in our state. And as a member of the sandwich generation who helped family navigate complex health issues last year with a 2 and a 4-year-old, I can speak firsthand to the challenges that people across our state are facing in the work that those direct care workers do. And so I'm proud that we came together in a bipartisan way during the pandemic to provide a boost to wages for direct care workers across the state. We've continued to fund that to make sure that they're making more than minimum wage. They deserve much more than that. But in this year's budget, we are including a $3.40 uplift on top of the minimum wage, which will get the direct care workers to just over $18 an hour. It was important for us to do that even in this difficult budget year because the services they provide are so critical.
Kind of changing the trajectory a little bit. I have a question about the letters and, we've made some investments this year and more investments are being planned in the recommendation. But could you give us an idea when you think the training will be completed and also if there are any opportunities for math and science performance support?
Sure. We have made record investments in literacy over the governor's time in office. It's been a priority since day one, and I think we've made some great progress together in building bipartisan support, especially over the last year and a half, for the science of reading and evidence-based approaches. Letters training is a really important tool when it comes to literacy and making sure educators have the resources that they need to help kids learn. So in this budget, we have a letters investment that we're proposing. We look forward to partnering with districts to roll that out and implement it.
I'll just add too, I think, that this investment continues to add, to build on what we've been doing. I think, obviously in the teacher profession, like there is a turnover rate. So I don't think we'll ever be done, right? Because we're going to have new educators entering the workforce every year. But we are making strides, and as a percentage, the number of educators that are trained is increased. And I think on the numeracy front, this budget also includes $12 million to support mathematics education on two different fronts. There's $3 million for professional development, specifically on numeracy, and then another $9 million that supports essentially literacy coaches, but numeracy coaches at ISDs to work specifically with districts in the same kind of fashion as literacy coaches, but for numeracy.
Senator DeMoose.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Flood, our jobs are kind of unique here. We're sort of paid to think in the big picture of things and locally. And, on the big picture, I will tell you that I have a hard time reconciling in my head any tax increases when we're talking about spending $88.1 billion. And I wrestled with it, whether they were tax increases last year for the roads plan or whether it's these things in the face of watching our families struggle with everything being affordable. But the other part of our job is to be real specific and local here. And one big, so I'm going to drill down there. One big deal to us in Northern Michigan has always been school transportation. And sometimes it's hard for people around the state to understand, but we have kids who ride the bus for an hour each way routinely. And I wanted to know whether you took into that we've done things and then taken them away and done them, tried different things throughout the year. Does this budget reflect any of these extra costs, which can be huge?
Yes, this budget includes $125 million for rural transportation because we know some of our rural districts face extraordinary transportation costs, and we want to make sure that we're helping to support them.
Representative Farhat.
Thank you, Chair, Director. Good to see you all. I want to ask a question that's informed by a story of mine. I have a constituent. His name is Mike. Mike is 30 years old. He's lived in Michigan his entire life. He works a 9 to 5 at his locally owned family fashion store in West Warren, Detroit. And he wants to get married. He wants to buy a house. But every month, at the end of the month, he gets a fat bill, about $1,000 a month for his mom's healthcare costs. And so he started Ubering now to make up for extra income to help defray those costs and continue to live a dignified life. That's very concerning for me that right now with rising healthcare costs, young people are being squeezed out of other opportunities and older folks are being denied care if they can't afford it. What in this budget would you say is a silver lining for them? I mean, what would you say we're doing here to put pressure to try and bring down these costs, given the fact that the feds have just washed their hands clean and people like Mike who relied on the federal government to help out are now being told to pull themselves up by the bootstraps even more than they already are?
Yeah, rising healthcare costs are a challenge for everyone. I know that we hear SBM talking frequently about it. My parents are small business owners and they've talked about the premium increases that they're seeing. And just like it's a problem for families, it impacts our state budget too. So the healthcare space is incredibly complex. There are different ideas about solutions out there. I think we're willing to work with anyone who wants to get serious about things that we can do here in the state. One thing that is included in this budget is ensuring that we continue to draw down our federal Medicaid dollars that were put at risk last July. When reconciliation passed, we were in a position where overnight the administration in DC could have pulled the rug out from underneath us and we would have lost $3 billion in Medicaid, which is unfathomable and would have impacted every family, neighborhood, community across our state. And so included in this budget is the fix that we all worked together on last year. I'm really proud of that bipartisan work. Representative Van Workum sponsored the bill and we're appreciative of that. So we've taken some steps here and continuing to make sure that our Medicaid program is sustainable is going to be really important in terms of what the state can do.
Thank you.
Representative Snyder.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Director Flood and Kyle. I can almost see you around this pole here. First, I'd like to echo the sentiments of Chair Anthony and what we're experiencing from the federal pinch on our state budget. But two questions. First one being in regards to the property tax rebate for seniors. The presentation referenced eligible seniors in one of the articles I read yesterday. Eligible seniors, is there a income threshold that they have to meet, or is it a certain amount of property tax? Is there any more details on that?
I want to confirm details. There is an income cap, and I believe the tax credit is based on a cap at $71,000 in income.
Okay. I really look forward to working together on that in some way, and especially our seniors who are experiencing these rising healthcare costs. I do think that there's some merits to that. But being from the deepest water port on the Michigan side of Lake Michigan and having an over 150-year maritime history in my community, we've heard a lot of pushes before for more shipping investments in the maritime industry. And I know this budget includes two different $5 million, one ongoing, creating a new office to coordinate some of this port activity, and then a $5 million one-time for maritime manufacturing. Can you speak a little bit more to that? Where will that office be set up? I know that MDOT has some role in seeing some port operational funding currently. Is that going to be taken over by that? Is that going to be within MDOT, or can you just speak more to that?
I can speak to the manufacturing portion, which is we think is really cool. So this was a partnership that we've had with the federal government on kind of building capacity in our state for folks that are and young people who are interested in that type of manufacturing. And there's a real need nationally for folks that are into shipbuilding. And so the feds funded that for a certain number of years. That money's now going away. We see value not only in helping support those young people, but there is an industry there and working with community college to help continue to support that sector. It's part of our growing defense base here in our state economically. And so we think it's a good way to invest dollars. I think on the office front, I think it's a combination of Leo and MDOT, but we can definitely follow up and get you more information.
Great. I look forward to that. I know in Muskegon, we've made some significant investments over the last year at the city level in drawing more port operations to our, we have the deepest water port. So the city themselves have made some significant investment. I look forward to finding ways to make that work. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Albert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director Flood. I guess, Madam Chair, I'll start with, just to clarify, I partially agree with the statement you made about the balance fund dollars and the COVID dollars. They are unrelated. I do agree with that. I think the point people are trying to make is that 3 years ago, we had a balanced surplus of funds between school aid fund and general fund of about $9.2 billion. Governor Whitmer and the Democrat legislature, after a short period of time, 93% of those funds were no longer there, available to spend. So that's the point people are trying to make. It would be really nice if we had those funds right now. I think everybody would agree with that. The $28 billion, the claim for the debt pay down, If you could provide those numbers to the clerk's office so we could have those publicly available. I've never been able to recreate the numbers that have been done in the past. I can't tell if they're fictitious, exaggerated, or if I'm missing something. So if we could just get to the truth, I'd appreciate it. But for my question, I'd like to kind of piggyback on what Rep. Farhat said. The exec rec lists $579.3 million in the insurance provider assessment. Does this number include a higher tax rate? And how much of these costs will be borne by small businesses through their commercial insurance plans?
The IPA numbers reflected in the budget reflect the legislation that was passed last year. Happy to follow up offline with additional information.
I'm sorry, that legislation permitted the tax rate to go up. So I'm asking what number you guys used to build that number? Did it go up? And then also how much of that's going to be passed on to the commercial insurance plans that small businesses have to pay?
HR 1 changed what tools we had available for Medicaid financing. We worked together with Republicans and Democrats in the legislature to make sure we could continue to draw down all of the federal funds for Medicaid. It's a bill that had broad bipartisan support. This budget reflects it, and I'm happy to follow up with you on additional information about what that looks like. On the debt pay down, I've seen the spreadsheets. I'm happy to provide them to you. And then on the one-time ARPA dollars, I did just want to flag there's a deadline for them to be spent. I think Kyle mentioned that December 31st of this year. So it was important that we deployed those dollars out into our communities, put them to work, got shovels in the ground, people working in jobs while we had the window to do that.
Representative Morgan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director, thank you so much for this presentation. I'm very happy to see the long-term roads and transit package funding included in this budget. And really want to note that that's the one area of this budget that is looking pretty strong in the face of a lot of other uncertainties. And that's the area that we all came together to work on in a bipartisan way to solve the problem rather than just continue to look at it. Looking at that new funding, I also want to note that it certainly could be included in your cost savings section, because as we all know, Michiganders are going to save money through the increased options to get to where they need to go through transit, and they're going to save money in their pocketbook with reduced costs from driving on our roads as we start to repair those roads over time, particularly our local neighborhood roads. But my question is if you could share with us a little bit more about how those dollars are going to be impacting our communities, particularly around that transit piece, around what total amounts are we looking at for public transportation investments through that? Thank you.
Thank you for highlighting that. We've talked a lot about the challenges facing our state, and last summer, after we were facing an immediate overnight $1 billion hole in our budget, we're facing a road funding cliff, bipartisan legislature divided legislature for the first time in many years. We had a lot working against us. It was some really hard work, but I'm really proud of the end product that came together, where we passed a bipartisan long-term road funding plan. We secured our Medicaid financing, and we passed a balanced budget that makes a difference in real people's lives. So we should all be proud of that work that we did together not too long ago. I know this year will be challenging, but I know that we have the ability to tackle it together. The road package supports 30,000 jobs across our state, and so it's an economic driver as well. And in terms of transit, in total, there's just over $1 billion in this budget. That's a combination of state, federal, local, and private funding. The new funding for transit reflected in this budget because of the package is $130 million, and it includes a 40% increase for LBOs over last year.
Senator Shink?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to make one comment for my colleagues who are complaining about the COVID funds not being there. If we hadn't spent them, I believe that most of them would have been clawed back by now anyway. So it was the prudent thing to do. I want to focus for a second on an affordable education. I'm one of the many, many Michigan kids who would have never have been able to attain the educational goals that I had for myself without scholarship. And I think one of the amazing strengths that Michigan has is that we do support young people and now somewhat older people who wish to attain a college education. And in your slide, it says that it saves $50,000 per child over the course of their education, the course that Michigan is taking with this budget. And that's really amazing. That's real savings for Michigan's families. And then also the Reconnect at 21, that gives a second chance for people to make a job switch or to go back to college. And, you know, without the support that I got back in the 80s, I probably wouldn't be here. And I believe that whether they're willing to say it or not, that probably applies to many of my colleagues as well. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how many people are taking advantage of those programs and what it means for families in Michigan today.
Yes, I will work on pulling what numbers we have here. Scholarships and support for people obtaining a post-secondary credential is something that we built incrementally over the last 7 years. Is in the governor's first term under Republican leadership in the legislature that we established the Reconnect program. At the same time, we established the Michigan Achievement Scholarship, so expanding to 4-year. We know that investing in those scholarships doesn't just save money for families, but it can change the lifelong trajectory of income and opportunity for the person who obtains the degree, their families, and future generations. So it has an enormous multiplier. And if we don't have numbers at our fingertips, we can follow up with you. Here's Reconnect. More than 66,000 students have enrolled in community college with Michigan Reconnect, and 100,000 plus students have been awarded the Achievement Scholarship.
Yeah, that's right. It says 2024. Yeah.
Thank you. And this will be our last question, Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for your presentation. We've talked, I've thought about, over my career here, about parity for students. We talked about the bipartisan work that we've done across the board on a lot of different things. We restored parity back in this current budget. Educators, schools want stable, predictable funding. We hear this all the time. So again, you're back to this obsession with reducing cyber schools as well as non-public support. Who does this help?
The budget that we're presenting today reflects the cost of educating a child. And we know that brick and mortar buildings have higher costs than cyber schools. And that's what we're proposing today.
But parity isn't about costs. It's about access. And it's about students. Where a student chooses to go that's best for he or her. That's what we should be about. Not about where they choose, or the ones that they go that are non-union supported. That's basically what this comes down to. If a student is non-union supported, you don't care. True or false?
False.
How's it? So back that up. Back up your statement with a truism about parity.
We've made record investment in our kids working together. Every education budget that the governor has signed has been bipartisan. We've increased the per pupil allowance for traditional public schools, charter
For union
schools.
supported children.
We've increased funding for all children in our state. We're really
No,
proud of the work.
We
that
did
we've
in
done.
this budget, but now you're going back to this well again, this dry well, and want to ding people's choices once again.
There are non-union public charter schools, right? And those charter schools that have non-union folks, which is their choice, they've received benefits from our public education budget.
All right, I want to thank everybody for being here, your attention, all the committee members. I know there are many more questions, but we will have weeks of subcommittee and the Appropriations Committee will be meeting. I just want to personally thank you, Director Flood and Deputy Director Kyle, very much for your presentation today. And I would just say, I too am very proud of the joint work we did working on this year's budget, where we did cut waste, we implemented the Working Families Tax Credit, we put almost $2 billion to roads, we addressed high costs of healthcare, and yes, indeed, there is more to do. We got a very good jobs report today. We had Clark come out and talk about the impact of tariffs. But I look forward to working with you to make life more affordable, taking care of our own, addressing the healthcare divide between rural and urban areas, and certainly in education and reducing the red tape. So with that, again, thank you very much. And with that, the House Appropriations Committee is adjourned.
And I'd like to thank everyone. Hold on now, wait a minute. I too would like to thank Director Flood, Deputy Director Garant, Chair Boland for holding this meeting. Even the conversations that we were having here just reminded me that we have 140 days. We have 140 days to pass a bipartisan budget, to get it to the governor's desk within the allotted time that the law requires. And while we did pass a bipartisan budget last year that included a sustainable roads plan, I think we would be kidding ourselves if we thought that last year was a successful process. We did not meet our statutory deadline. We left local governments, we left school districts, we left nonprofits and the business community with uncertainty, with chaos, with unprofessionalism, sometimes with name calling, that was below the institution, that was beneath us as professionals and as lawmakers. So my charge today, and it will start with myself, is that I am recommitting myself. I'm going to ask the senators that are here to also rededicate yourselves to being professional, to being prepared for negotiations, to making sure that if we have to have sometimes difficult conversations, that we first work with each other, regardless of political party, to get things done for the people of Michigan. Because I don't want another embarrassing budget negotiation. I want folks to look at the lawmakers that they elected to serve and say, we're proud of what came out of the Capitol. Because that's what our people expect of us. And that's what they deserve. And what we saw from this presentation is that this is going to be a very challenging year. We can place blame wherever we want to place it, but the reality is the numbers don't lie. And so this is going to take a lot of courage from all of us. So I'm excited about this process. I look forward to working with everyone. And with that, Senator McCann moves and Senator Bumstead supports that we adjourn the Senate Committee on Appropriations. Without objection, the committee stands adjourned.